Well, howdy, as they say down in Texas, although we're not in Texas. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're with us today. And right now we have the opportunity to chat with Vanesa Cotlar. Vanesa is in Canada, a very people-oriented person, as I've been reading with her bio, and she has been involved with a number of different endeavors regarding that. And I'm going to let her tell us all about that. So I don't want to give it away, which is, kind of what I like to do. It's no fun giving it all away. And then why would we want to interview people or talk with people? So we won't do that. Vanesa, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michael.
Well, why don't we start by maybe kind of talking about the early Vanesa growing up and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. Where would you like me to begin? Right at the beginning, or
oh, sure, whatever you'd like
over?
to. Well, I think start at the beginning, where you came from, and all of that, and moving forward.
That sounds great. So you and I chatted a little bit about this ahead of today, but I was born in Argentina. And I moved to Canada with my family when I was 9. So a little bit of a shift. Spanish is actually my first language. I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is where I am today, between ages 9 and 18. And then went off to university, or college, as they say in the US. And I went to Queens University in Ontario here. And when I finished, I started working right downtown Toronto in management consulting. From there on, my career ended up taking a little bit of a unique shift. I was thinking about what else I wanted to do as I was kind of gearing up to my third year into consulting, and I ended up doing a 1-year global remote working program. So I worked in 12 countries over 12 months with a group of 35 other professionals, ranging from consultants, lawyers, software developers, a big mix of people, and ended up co-founding an HR tech startup. So big shift from consulting to HR tech, but after that, moved to Germany with it. It was a bit of a roller coaster, and ultimately, as most startups, our startup failed, and it ended up coming back to Canada in 2019 and moved more into the people side of tech. So it's been a little bit over 5 years now that I've been in the people and tech space with my startup, and then more fully into the roles. And today, I sit as the VP of People and Culture at PolicyMe. We're a digital insurance startup that's based out of Toronto, but we focus on being remote first so that our people can work from wherever they work best. And currently I am in Winnipeg, as I was saying before. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of that context that you were looking for.
So PolicyMe is an interesting name. What prompted that, or where did that come from? And what does it do a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined about 2 years ago, and the company started March 2018. And the idea behind it was around simplifying insurance. And at the beginning, it was term life. And now we've added a couple other products on the critical illness side of things, and we're building a few more. The idea is insurance has always been a bit of an outdated industry in terms of requiring in-person application, it being quite complicated to figure out kind of what you need and making sure you're getting the right advice. So PolicyMe creates a way for people to do that in a digital first format, so that for more than half the people that go through, you can essentially have an underwritten insurance policy in about 20 minutes. And then we also have advisors. So if you're the type of person that, you would like hopping on the phone, you like talking to the humans, we do that too, and we're able to help you through it.
Well, cool. Well, let's go back a little. So you moved from Argentina when you were 9. I don't know, maybe an interesting age. I don't know whether it was a tough age to move to Canada. What was it like moving from Argentina to Canada?
Yeah, good question. I think it's interesting because at that age, obviously you're not moving as a fully formed adult, so there's some different nuances. I think when you move later in life around work and your career or educational components that come into play. But I think what was really challenging was, moving to a new country where I didn't speak the language, and leaving a home where I was really comfortable and leading what felt like my normal childhood. I do think one of the big things, so when I think back to that time in my life, and one of the things that I think kind of influenced who I am today is, I think moving to a new place where you don't speak the language and you're doing everything from scratch at that age, it kind of gives you a greater sense of empathy, because I think it helps you understand that it's it's really challenging, to go into a place where maybe people don't understand what you're trying to say, and then they're trying, but then they also get frustrated. And I just remember it wasn't the easiest thing for sure at that age, but I think one of the interesting things is it helped me really see that the world is not all the same, and that it's super important to just do your best to take your time to definitely try to understand people, because it can be really hard for the person trying to explain themselves too.
Sure. What prompted the family to move?
Another good question. There are a lot of economic crises that happen in Argentina over the decades, and there was one in 2001 that was a pretty substantial economic crisis, and it led for a lot of people to leave the country, and that's where my parents had started to look at different opportunities outside of Canada, and we ultimately, different opportunities outside of Argentina, and that's how we ultimately ended up moving to Canada.
Well, you certainly acclimatized yourself pretty well. You sound Canadian, and I don't hear, maybe that's training, but I don't hear a lot of the Spanish influence in your voice, although I suppose I could work at it more, but you do sound definitely much more Canadian, and English has become an integral part of what you do now.
Yeah, I will say most people say I sound very Canadian. Most people, unless I tell them that I wasn't born here, don't really pick up on it. But I think, it was one of those things of just really focusing in on the language. And, they say if you move to a new country before you're 12, that can be where you're able to kind of adopt a new language as though it were your first language without an accent. So yeah. I think I was one of those lucky ones that the languages seemed to make sense.
Yeah, and I think I can hear a little bit of the Spanish now that I look at it a little bit more. But even so, how do you think that moving, although that was now, 22 years ago, how do you think that impacted the direction your life took from a career standpoint?
It's a good question. I mean, I think because I was so young at that age, I definitely wasn't thinking about my career. When you're 9 and moving, it's more around school and friends and what's that going to look like. But I do think when I started working, one of the things that was really important to me was trying to see how people that were just landing in Canada could get access to more opportunities. And back in 2019, I was working at Economic Development Winnipeg, and one of the things that we were looking at is how to bring more talent into Winnipeg to support the growing tech ecosystem here and other companies. And I actually was fortunate enough to go down for an international recruitment mission to Argentina, where we helped Argentinian tech talent move to Canada for professional opportunities here. So I think one of the things that it's done for me is definitely helped see, there isn't just talent in Canada, just talent in the US, and there's talent everywhere. And now with the world that we live in, it's a lot more global. So I think definitely looking beyond the borders of a country where possible to look for opportunities for other people too.
Sure. So when you went to Queens University, what did you major in?
I studied business, and I would say it's interesting because at Queens, they actually don't ask you to declare a major in the business program, or at least back then they didn't. And they ask you, to choose the classes that you're most interested or what you want to pursue. So my focus ended up being in strategy and management consulting, but it wasn't, it was always interesting because speaking to people that went to other schools, they would say, oh yeah, and I majored in this. And anyone that went to Queens Commerce would always say, like, I focused in this instead, just because it wasn't as strongly defined as other places.
Uh-huh. Well, but you clearly left after getting your degree and went into very much people-oriented kinds of opportunities. So I mean, it's pretty interesting. Was that something that you had planned on doing specifically, or did it just sort of turn out that way?
Yeah, so I would say starting in management consulting definitely was my plan. I did a few different internships while in university. I started in accounting. I thought I wanted to be an accountant, and then I did not. I did an internship in distribution services, which I liked quite a bit. And then I did my final internship in management consulting at Deloitte. and I ended up going back full time. And when I first started management consulting, my focus was on strategy and operations of large organizations. So corporate and business unit strategy, thinking about the big challenges and where organizations were going. And I think where I ended up kind of focusing more on the people side of things was I was always super curious about the implications of the strategic recommendations and the so what, like who's going to actually deliver the strategy, what's the day-to-day going to look like. And I think that ultimately led me to start exploring that side of things more.
Yeah. Well, so let's look at that a little bit. So getting into where organizations are going and what they're doing and the strategies and so on, what do you feel is happening today? And do you think it's different than it used to be in terms of how companies and organizations work, how they interact with human beings? How do you think all that is changing, and is it changing for the better or not?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's obviously like a difference between, I think, the strategic direction of a company, you know, where are you focusing product wise or what are you building, and then how you create the supporting blocks for the humans that are going to be a part of delivering that. I think to hone in on the people side of things, as you're getting at there too, I think that one of the big shifts that I've seen is that there's this new focus on how can we help people work the way they want to work best. So moving away from, you know, are you in office to are you hybrid to are you remote to this concept of we really should be looking at what enables individuals to perform as best as they can and creating around that. So I think there definitely are a lot of changes in how companies are viewing their relationship to their employees and also viewing how they create the environment so that people can ultimately thrive in their roles.
I had a discussion with someone last week, actually, I think, who said that his concern about big business and so on, primarily, though, is that it's becoming a whole lot less humanistic. It is strictly, at least in the U.S., so much focused on profit and not worrying nearly as much about the human interaction. Do you think that's really true, or do you think that it's different here than maybe in some other places?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it depends by organization, right? Like it depends on the culture and the values that a company has. I think the best companies that I've seen tend to focus on the fact that the people are the strongest assets that they have and their biggest opportunity for differentiation and success. But of course, that's not true in every organization in terms of where the focus is.
Do you think that in terms of discussing the whole concept of people, where they're working and how they work, do you think that the pandemic has really been a major influence in the whole issue of allowing people to maybe work more at home? Is that a good human approach that makes a lot of sense for companies to consider more than they used to?
I think the pandemic was a catalyst. You know, it helped companies see what could be possible because change had to happen quickly. And I think there's big moments where something happens and it causes us to think how we operate day to day. And then certain companies, when they have the opportunity to go back, have, and then other companies have thought more intentionally about what worked, what didn't, how do we create the best environment, how do we enable flexibility. Because the truth is most companies can now almost like logistically do it. You know what I mean? Like the mechanics are there. People have their laptops. People had to work from home. So the mechanics to make it work are there. But I think a lot of it comes down to were companies able to trust their employees and were employees able to deliver. And I think in many cases, organizations were just really pleasantly surprised, you know, by giving people time back in their days from not having to commute, or by giving them the choice of, you know, if you want to be in office, if you want to be at home, people were able to kind of take more ownership of their day to day, which a lot of the times has led to greater satisfaction at work, right? Which ultimately leads to better performance of employees.
The trust concept, I think, is very interesting. And I can appreciate that. I think there are probably a whole lot of companies that said, gee, can we really trust our employee? Will they just goof off, or will they really be conscientious? And my impression is that, in fact, in reality, we have seen a lot of companies and a lot of places where the trust wasn't violated and the trust really was there, and maybe should have done it earlier, but the pandemic still brought it about. And the reality is that is what goes into building a team. It's all about trust and working together.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're finding out that in fact you can trust, and if you can't trust someone, then maybe that's, especially going forward, not the right person to have, or that person has to grow and develop the trusting relationship that's necessary. But it is a challenge, and I'm sure that there are some companies that found a different kind of situation as well. So it's probably a mixed bag, but I would think overall, giving people the opportunity to do some more work at home, not just be in an office all day, probably was a very positive thing. I know for me personally, a lot of the companies over the years that I've worked for were located in different places where I was. I would be asked to go start an office for a company somewhere or whatever. So I'm used to that environment. So it didn't really bother me with the pandemic as much as it probably did with other people. But still, it makes a lot of sense to do. And I would think overall does build a better working environment for everyone if people can do some of the work on their own terms or in their own locations.
Yeah, I think the flexibility honestly makes a lot of sense, as much as companies can afford to offer it to employees.
Yeah. Do you think that it's going to continue, or do you think that people will go back more toward, oh, we got to have you back in the office now that the pandemic is over?
Yeah, it's one of those things that there's lots of news articles about different companies pulling people back in, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or even fully in office. But I think, at least from my perspective, it's really important to think about the why. If you're looking to remove flexibility, you should have a clear decision as to why it's important to remove that flexibility or that choice that you had given your employees. And for some companies, I think it's a lack of trust that makes them want to see their employees in person. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to bring people back in. I think for organizations that have noticed, productivity loss, or they weren't able to get what they needed with employees not being, maybe located in the same team room, for sure, if you can explain why you need people in person, I think it's something that should be considered. But I think in most cases, it's not really necessary. So I think that for all the organizations that are kind of bringing people back, whenever people ask me about it, I always say, well, think about the why. Do you actually really need them to come in? Is it just because you still have that office space and no one's filling it? Because that really is not a good enough reason. Or feeling like, you want to see the people in person every day, but why? So I say ask a lot of why questions and really think about the strategy behind it. Because I have had people interview for us that said, I love my job, but they're asking me to go back in person 5 days a week. And I have a child at home, and I like to be able to not have to do an hour commute each way and spend more time with my kid in the mornings and at the end of the day. And it just doesn't make sense for me to go back in office. So I think sometimes companies are missing out on retaining their top performers if they don't offer the flexibility.
The other thing, though, is that, I have a kid at home and I want to spend more time with the kid, but also let's use your example of commuting an hour each way a day. That's 2 hours that could potentially be a whole lot more useful from a productivity standpoint if people didn't have to make the commute all the time.
Yeah. And I think for me, the way that I look at it, it's not even like 2 more hours that someone can work. And that's why I was saying, it's 2 hours you can spend with your kid, 2 hours where you can go outside for a walk, where you can exercise, where you can do things that you otherwise couldn't until you get home. And I think it enables people to live healthier lives, both physically and mentally, when they have a bit more choice in how they spend their days.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't mean to imply that that's 2 hours only that you spend working, but it's still, no matter what you do, if it makes you more productive in some way, then that's a very positive thing. Yeah.
And, to your point, I would say even in cases where people have to work late, you know what I mean? It kind of redefines what late means if you don't have to commute, right? Because when you were working late at an office, you still had those 2 extra hours of getting there and getting home, right? So I do think from every standpoint, it does create more time back.
My wife and I were married for 40 years. She passed last November. And I have found
Oh, I'm
since,
sorry.
well, I appreciate that. Thank you. But what I've noticed since is that since, in a sense, my time is more my own once dealing with all of the stuff about her passing, my work schedule has caused me to sometimes work later into the evenings and sometimes not necessarily working quite as much in the middle of the day. Or sometimes I make the decision to work for 10 or 11 hours, or sometimes not as much. But the reality is that I wouldn't have that flexibility if I were just reporting to an office every day.
Yeah, exactly. And this way you get to choose, right?
And that's exactly right. It's all about a choice, as long as I know what the rules are in terms of what I have to be able to produce. And I think that's what companies really need to do, is to define what the rules need to be, recognizing trust and so on, but define what it is that they expect from employees, and then let employees have the choice as to how they want to maybe make some of that happen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Seems to me it makes a whole lot of sense. Well, in your life and all that you've done, have you found that you've developed any kind of network of mentors or people that have helped you through the years, and do you keep up with them?
Yeah, good question. I think that mentorship is something that's super valuable, both, to find a mentor, to be a mentor. I think what's interesting though is I think mentors come and go throughout your career as well. Like I've had a few different mentors over the years that served me in different capacities, but I think it's rare that one person becomes like your lifelong career mentor. And I think a lot of it has to do with where you're working, the industry that you're in, as you shift and change careers. I currently have an incredible mentor in the people and culture space who is about 5-6 years ahead of me professionally. And she brings me tremendous insight into what I do, because when I have questions or when I need someone to brainstorm with about things that I'm thinking, she is there for me as a sounding board, which has been amazing. And I think one of the other things too, and I know we were going back and forth a little bit on this one as well, but it's this concept that I mentioned to you of peership, which is the idea of, there's mentors, which are people that are further ahead, but there's peers, which are the people that are your network, your direct peers, same type of role in other companies that are also immensely valuable to have and be connected to. And I have a few of those that I've built connections with, and they can also be an excellent sounding board for more of like the day to day, because they experience similar challenges and opportunities to the ones you do. So I think it's really important to think about, where do you need a mentor? Where do you need a peer? And I always say in those types of relationships, thinking about how much you can give back as well. So not just about what you need, but how you can support them and benefit them too.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask about that, because the reality is it goes both ways, right? You value mentors, and you have mentors, and you have peers that can be sounding boards for you. But if you do it, and I guess I'll just put it this way, if you do it the right way, that goes both ways, and you are also a sounding board and a mentor for others. And sometimes I would also think that sometimes even mentors for you who have more experience may find that you can give them insights that they hadn't thought of, even though they're ahead of you from a work standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, having had people that I've been in that position for as well, people that I mentor, sometimes they ask me a question or they say something and I'm like, that's really thoughtful. I really appreciate you asking that. I hadn't thought about it in that way. Let me also share that with my team. Or let me share that with others on LinkedIn as a question and answer it for others to be able to see the answer as well. So I definitely think there's opportunity for it to go both ways.
What do you think, or how would you define leadership, and who do you think are good leaders in a company maybe that you interact with, or just in general? How do you determine who's a good leader and who may not be such a great leader, whatever that definition might be?
Yeah, that's a huge question. It's funny. When I did my MBA, we had a whole class on leadership, which was about, defining what is leadership, what are the skills that make for a good leader. And we talked about beyond that, what are the things that matter to us personally. I think uh, there's the broader definitions of leadership and everything from being the person that empowers others to deliver their best, the concepts of building trust, the concepts of enabling others to do more than they could have on their own. But I think that it's a very personal concept in some ways, which is, I think something that makes for a really great leader is someone that takes the time to think about their own leadership style, how they want to lead, how they want to be known, and how they can adapt based then on who's on their team, right? Because not everyone benefits from being led in the same way. And one of the things that I've always valued is having those conversations with people that are on my team on a regular basis. Like, hey, is what I'm doing working? Is the way that I'm giving feedback helping you grow in the way that you want? Do you feel like you can give me feedback in ways that is easy for you and in ways that helps us build this relationship? Am I giving you enough context for your work? Am I enabling you to have enough ownership in your day to day? I think good leaders constantly are asking themselves these questions and asking their teams these questions. And in terms of great leaders, I have so many I can share that I work with regularly. I'll give you one example. There's a company that I've actually used to support. I ran a 12-session cohort for our manager group and our exec team on leadership development. And I used a lot of content from an organization called Elevate Leadership. And the founders there, Lucy and Lindsay, they have incredible content on leadership development, how to be a good manager, everything from, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, how to run effective one-on-ones, how to have tough conversations, all the big things that managers need to get good at and that, leaders have in their toolkit. And they've developed some really incredible content there. And I worked closely with both of them. And I think just their thinking is always awesome in ways to deliver good content that helps others lead better. And I think, they lead by example. And when you talk to them, that they really live and breathe the content that they share as well.
Yeah. And also good leaders know when to give up trying to be the leader in any particular situation and let someone else who may have more skills in a particular area take the lead and then be willing to shift back and let the leader take over when a job is done. But good leaders, as you point out, are all about really understanding their people and learning how to interact with them. And how you interact with one person may not be the same way that you interact with someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because not everyone works the same. And so it is important to be able to understand that. And good leaders work through that. I know that for me, I always, when I hired someone new, said, my job is to add value to what you do, and you and I will have to figure out how best to make that happen. And I think that's important for leaders in general to understand. There isn't one mold fits all.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you're clearly a pretty inspiring person. How do you find ways to share so much inspiration, and how do you share your inspiration and your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Michael. I think for me, something that has gotten into my daily habits has been sharing content on LinkedIn. I think is such a good way to be able to kind of share thoughts with a broader set of people. It's actually been really incredible. I started posting more and engaging more with others during the pandemic, just because I've always been someone that used to think of community as an in-person thing. But when COVID hit and we went to more so be at home, I started posting, I started engaging with others. And I would say, especially in the last year, even as things opened up, I just found it was a really great way to connect with others globally. And it's been great. I mean, I share content every day, and I connect with others that also share content pretty regularly. And it's been a fantastic way not only to share my thoughts, but to be inspired by those of others.
I don't know how possibly to figure a way to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just for fun. I agree. There is so much that's happening on LinkedIn, and it's a way where a lot of business people have reacted well. Why LinkedIn as opposed to some of the other social media? What is it that LinkedIn has that makes business people and organizational people and people who are looking to build teams so much prefer that to some of the other social media? Do you have any insight into that?
I mean, I think primarily it started because it's a job board, right? Like, I think people go on LinkedIn when they're looking for work. Mm-hmm. And by it being such a large repository of open positions internationally, with it having this space to create content, I think it became analogous to like the professional social network. This is where you go look for work. This is where you go look for expertise. This is where you share your thinking, and others can find you here too. So I think it has definitely, from a recruitment standpoint, the strongest recruitment capabilities and the strongest recruitment tools built within it. So there's a number of added and paid features that companies can use. There's also a sales funnel component, and I've never explored that one very much, but definitely from a recruitment standpoint, it helps you find the people you need to find. And then you also can understand who they are a little bit better based on what they post, who they engage with. And that I think a lot of people use, Instagram, or, I'm not on TikTok, but many people use it. And, how we used to use Facebook was more to stay in touch with, friends, family. You talked about your life, but I think LinkedIn has become the place where you share it around more your professional achievements or your professional thoughts. And it enables you to kind of hone in on it in that way. So I think, for me, I look at Instagram as more like people's personal lives, which, if I'm hiring someone, I would never go look because I think it's their choice what they're doing. But I think LinkedIn is more where you're choosing your professional image to put out there. So that's where I love to take a peek to see how are people presenting themselves, what is it that they're looking to do and to put out into the world.
Interesting. And, it's very true that I think the inertia at LinkedIn and the inertia that now so many bring to LinkedIn, who talk about the professional image and so on, and who say things like, don't try to sell me something here on LinkedIn. We're not here to do that as such. We're here to learn. We're here to understand what you're looking for. Or like the podcast that I do. We talk about the podcast on LinkedIn, not trying to sell anyone anything. We invite people and they can choose to come or not. But it's really insightful to see how people behave on LinkedIn, because it has become so very oriented toward the image and people looking to support each other in a professional way. And I think that's great that I'm sure the people at LinkedIn intended that, but still the inertia of so many people using LinkedIn now and using it in that way, people have bought into it and made it very successful.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which is certainly a good thing. So it's a valid way to do it. I don't use TikTok and I don't use really Instagram very well. TikTok and both of those are pretty inaccessible in a lot of ways. And of course, a lot of it is that they're putting out a lot of photos and they're not doing enough to perhaps make that information accessible, but nevertheless, that's what's happening. Yeah. So some of us don't, and some people seem to go there and love it, but not for the kinds of things that you get from LinkedIn.
Yeah, I would agree.
So if you encounter somebody who wants to be a person who wants to be a leader in the people culture space, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, another good question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's depending on, for someone that's just starting or someone that's a little later on. I just think it's super important to get clear on the why. I think that it helps you focus or determine if you want to generalize. Like, there's so many subcomponents between basically when you think of people, the people and culture space in a large organization, it's a bigger team. There's people that solely do recruitment, people that solely do learning and development, people that solely support, parts of the business as HR business partners. And there's much more specialization and so on and so on in terms of roles. And I think in smaller companies, it's kind of this, everyone does everything type of roles, or, there's only a couple people and you're managing a much broader set of things. And there's no right or wrong answer. I always say to people, think about what you're most interested in. Think about, if you want to be a specialist, if you want to be a generalist, what it means within that realm. And then in terms of like how to actually get in the space, I always say just think about in terms of talking to people to understand what their day-to-day looks like, and think about the organizations that potentially may have the opportunities that are best aligned to what you're looking for. And like any other field, I think, having a little bit of experience always helps, but to get that first experience, a lot of the times it just means starting in a lower level role if it's something you've never done before, to really understand it, or thinking about how your past experiences can actually translate really well into a different part of the people and culture space. So I think there isn't just like one right or wrong way to kind of get into it. But then once you're in it, I think one of the best things that I've seen is people that share their thinking. In the people and culture space and in HR, it is one of those fields where I have no problem if anyone wants to steal my ideas, I'm happy to tell you all my ideas. If they're helpful to you, use them. There's nothing that becomes like trade secrets or ways that, interfere with a company's ability to sell its product or whatever that looks like. So I think what's really cool about the space is it is one where we can share quite openly about best practices. So I always say, if you want to be a leader in the space, just share about what worked for you, share about what didn't, and help others kind of learn from your experiences as well. And that's where I've found the greatest opportunity for connection with others too.
And be a sponge, be willing to collect knowledge and get knowledge from other people. And of course, we talked about mentors, which are always valuable to find. And my thought also still is that you also might very well be a mentor to somebody else, because you're going to come with your own ideas, which will be different than a lot of other people. So it is a two-way street, but you do have to start somewhere. And it's appropriate to take some time to learn, be a student, and recognize that in reality, you're going to be a student your whole life. People are interesting creatures, and you're going to find new things that happen dealing with people all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
So, people are very interesting, and it's fascinating to see how we end up really interacting with people and how we do the things that we do. But it's great that this, as you're describing it, is a field where people can interact so well. And I don't want to say there's no magic to it, but there's no magic to forming a team, or no magic to learning from other people, because you're all trying to hopefully do the same thing and making yourself and those you work with more successful.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value to that. Well, so do you do a lot of your work in office, or do you do most of yours remote? What do you find works best for you?
Yeah, we are a remote first company. So we let people choose how they want to work. We do have an office in Toronto, but it's totally optional for people to go in. And we get together in person 3 times a year and fly people in for those that don't have Toronto as their home base. So yeah, I am remote first.
Yeah, you are quite a ways from Toronto, I would think.
Yeah.
You're not gonna walk or drive there every day from Winnipeg.
Definitely not. I wouldn't make it before the end of the day.
Unless you learn to run a whole lot faster, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as you have been doing the things that you've done, you worked with mentors and so on, have you found any other outside sources like books or whatever that have really influenced you, authors that you've learned from, or that maybe you wanted to meet and get to know better, who really had a great impact on your style and what you do?
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting. I would say in terms of content nowadays, I get so much of it from LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
love reading what others are sharing in terms of their knowledge. For books, I was thinking about this ahead of today. I actually have one right next to me to show you, which is called Leaders Eat Last. And it's a Simon Sinek one. This one is one of my favorites because it talks a lot about that concept of trust and how trust within teams is paramount. And that if people feel safe within kind of their circle of what makes up their team, they're just going to perform a lot better than if they feel a sense of competition or like they can't really trust the people that they're closest to in their day to day. And it was talking a lot about how by making choices that enable that trust building within a team, then you're able to essentially have better longer term outcomes too. So that's for sure one. And then the other one that I read that I loved, and it's funny because I'm still a paper person, as you can see by all this paper next to me. But I have this notebook, and I use it as my agenda. But in the back, I always write lots of notes on different things. And one of the books that led me to write a lot of notes was Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but basically it's this really awesome book that teaches you that basically if you break anything down to be small enough, anyone can start pretty much anything. And it's the whole concept of, start with 2 minutes of it. If you're trying to get more into writing, just write for 2 minutes, even once a week, or 2 minutes every day. Or if you want to start exercising again, go for a 2-minute run. It may seem like nothing, but that's how habits are built. And it was this really interesting idea of like finding the micro moments as a means of starting different habits that can then turn into macro moments over time. And I've used that in different ways in terms of how I work and structure my days and things that I brought into my life. And I think both of those concepts have been super helpful.
I have a favorite book of mine, which is all about teamwork and team building. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you've ever read that. I think that's a great
good one,
book.
yeah.
It is, because it really talks about teamwork. And it also depicts teaming in a little bit different way than a lot of people may view it, because it says it's okay to have conflict on the team as long as you all, and here's the operative part, right? Trust that you're all working together. And that's, of course, what so many companies have to really learn to do, is to trust, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I think trust really is at the core of successful teams.
Yeah. So I've enjoyed that book a great deal and had a lot of fun with it. Of course, for me, I also, in building teams, have worked with now 8 guide dogs. And the reality is that what you learn when you are deciding to, if you're blind and using a guide dog, is you're building a team. The dog has a job to do, the person has a job to do, and you have to build that trust, because dogs may love unconditionally, but they don't trust unconditionally. But they are open to trust. And that's something that we seem to learn so much of not to do. That is, to be open to trust. We keep hearing about why you don't trust. But the reality is that the people who are open to exploring trust are going to go a lot further.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think the day-to-day that you're describing is probably not the day-to-day most people think about, and it's interesting to have the different takeaways from knowing that not all of our day-to-days look the same, and what we can learn from each other too.
Yeah. And I think that we can always learn from other people, even people who I may not trust. I will still learn from them. I will learn from them, or at least I'm open to learning from them, whether they know it or not, because we're always planting seeds with whatever we do. And you never know who's going to be able to benefit from the seeds that we plant.
Yeah, exactly.
So planting seeds and deciding to be a student are really very important sorts of things that I advocate all the time with all of my employees, that it's important for you to do. Well, so you've been doing this a while and you have developed clearly a lot of experience just listening to you talk. Is there anything that you wish you had known, say, 10 years ago that you know now that you didn't know then that would have helped you a great deal and that you'd love to go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. I always say hindsight's 2020.
Oh, yeah.
But I also think that I, if I'd taken any different path, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I love where I am today. So I think for me, when I think back to, the past and some of the things that I chose, I do think, 10 years ago, I would have said to myself, uh, HR is going to be a cool career, I promise. Like you think that you're not sure because there's other things that look shinier and better, but I promise it's going to be cool. That said, I don't think I would be as good as I am at my job if I hadn't spent the beginning of my career in strategy and management consulting because it helped me see how organizations work. It helped me really understand, how CEOs, how executives think. And when ultimately, 5 and a bit years ago, I transitioned into the HR and the tech space, I just had so much more of a base that I wouldn't have had if I just had started in HR. So I think for me, when I think about what advice would I give myself, it's okay to pivot. I think that the concept of work has changed a lot. In the past, people used to be in a company usually for 20, 30 years. If you were leaving after, less than 10 years, and you're like, oh, where are you going? There was this concept of like, we just start a job and we stay in it. And I think now that has changed so much and it's changing even more. I would say, I remember, about 10 years ago, people used to stay like maybe 3 or 4 years and you started to think about something else. Now that number is like two. If someone stays more than 2 years, it's like, wow, that company is doing something great because people can move around really quickly. So I think if I could go back and say something to myself, it would be like, don't be afraid to try. And if something doesn't work, it's okay to leave it. And we only learn by trying. And I think I always say that, you're either winning or you're learning. And I think just getting comfortable with the fact that failure happens everywhere, but it doesn't mean you failed and your life is over. You just learn from it and try something else. I think that can be a much more motivating way to look at taking risks, trying new opportunities. It's not really going to be about what happens if it goes wrong. It's like, there really is no wrong. If it doesn't go as planned, you learn from it and you take what you learn and you try again. So I think that concept of, being okay with trying different things, being okay with pivoting and just focusing on resiliency being that underlying theme.
I had the opportunity fairly recently to talk to someone who is actually, among other things, is a champion for accessibility in Canada. And he works at Statistics Canada. He's one of the deputy director generals, or director generals, I guess. And he started at StatsCan 34 years ago, was given an opportunity. He's blind, but they gave him the opportunity and said that they would provide him with the tools that he needed. And he's always stayed there. We talked about that. And one of the things that he said is that I never found anything that would really offer me a better home and a more welcoming environment than what StatsCan actually has offered. And so he's continued to stay there and move along. Yeah. It is amazing because you just don't hear that very often. And you wonder how much of that is from his mental attitude. He was really open to and found that was a welcoming home, as opposed to, well, I got to change every 2 or 3 years. And he said, I've had people tell me I should change, but I've never found anything that was anywhere nearly so economically or at least emotionally rewarding as staying at StatsCan.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
So he continues to deal with statistics and make life hopefully very interesting, but he enjoys it. And it's very unusual that you find anyone who stays somewhere very long or maybe even necessarily stays in the same career.
Yeah, that's true.
How do you advise people about that?
What do you mean? Like switching careers, switching jobs?
Well, Probably somewhat both, but I assume people do more job switching than really going off and taking a whole new career unless something really causes them to need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to think about kind of your own goals and where you want to go. I always say think about, 2, 3 years from now, what do you want to have learned? What do you want to have experienced? And where is the best place to do that? Is it where
Mm-hmm.
you're at today? Are the opportunities that you're looking for going to be there for you? And if not, if you're thinking about a new opportunity, what makes you a bit more confident that that place will give you those experiences and those skills you're looking to learn? And I think, it's never an easy decision to switch jobs. So I always say, think about from the perspective of where you're looking to go, think about what teams you're joining. What is it that you're giving up? What is it that you're getting? And ultimately thinking about where the best path for you is, I think is super important. I do think most people that are looking for a job are doing so for a reason, right? Like there's something in their current opportunity that just isn't feeling quite right for them, or they're looking to grow in a way that may just not be available. I think one of the things that's super important is, if an organization doesn't think it's going to have the role or the vacancy that someone is looking for, to just be honest and to support them in that process of building their skills so that they can be prepared for a role elsewhere. I do think because careers are long and people do switch jobs now, if the role that you want is not going to be available at your company, say for 5 years, and you think you're going to be ready next year, it's important to look at kind of what your best path is. But I always say to try to be as open as possible in those conversations, because if your manager, your leader knows kind of what you're looking for, that's how they can be best placed to support you too.
Especially if they're willing to do that and willing to look at you advancing or dealing with your career. And that's always a good part of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's an effort, but hopefully more managers than not, and I'm sure that it is true, are really looking out for your best interest and not letting ego get in the way.
Yeah, I agree.
So in your career thus far, you've been working in this field now for how long?
In the people space, about 5.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So between that and the rest of your life, is there something that you're really proud of, something that you feel has been a great accomplishment for you?
Yeah. I think that when I think back to, moments in my career, and even not just now, but I'm sure, 10 years from now, when I'm looking back, I think I'm in a really particularly unique moment right now with building the culture and the team at PolicyMe. We were just over 35 when I joined. Now we're almost 65. So I think having had the opportunity to be at the center of building the culture of an organization, being so involved with how a company grows and its future has been pretty incredible. So I'm really proud of the team we've built, and it's obviously not just me, but I love that I've been a part of helping create an environment where most people are really proud to work and where they tend to enjoy their day-to-days.
So you're a builder.
I am a builder, yes.
Well, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. As long as you can do it and be successful, then go to it. That's what I would say. Well, I want to thank you very much for doing this and for spending so much time with us today. I hope that this has been beneficial for anyone who is listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. I really appreciate all the nuggets of wisdom that you have given us and left us with. So thank you very much for all of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's been a lovely conversation.
This has been a lot of fun. Well, I also would say if people want to reach out, maybe contact you, maybe learn more from you or be a mentor or look for a mentor or any of the things that we've talked about today, how do they do that?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And I think we'll probably drop that link here when this goes live, but
we will, but say it anyway.
It's my name, so Vanesa Cotlar. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only person with my name, which makes me easy to find.
And Vanesa is spelled with one S.
With one S, yes, that creates the uniqueness.
So Vanesa, Cotler on LinkedIn. Any other ways, or is that the best way?
I think that's the best one. Yeah.
Cool. Well, there you go. See, that goes back to what we talked about before, why LinkedIn's so valuable. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you again, and I want to thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. Love to hear your thoughts about this. And Vanessa, for you and for people listening, if you know of other people that we ought to have on as guests on Unstoppable Mindset, please let me know. Always looking for more people and always looking for other ideas. I love to feel that I'm learning from every guest and every conversation that we have. And I hope that everyone else is as well. So please pass along any thoughts that you have. And if you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to do it. A couple of different ways. Easiest way is Michael H.I. at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Also, you could go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And we're on LinkedIn. Michael Hingson is on LinkedIn as well. So you can reach us all sorts of different ways, but would love any of your thoughts, any of your comments. And as always, please give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your thoughts and your comments. And I know Vanessa does as well. So again, Vanessa, one last time, I'd like to thank you for being here with us. And anytime you want to come back, we'd love to have you back to talk some more.
Thank you again for having me, Michael. It's my pleasure.